Grab your gear, let's hit the water. Paddle and fin where the vibe gets hotter. Kayak fishing, straight talk, hear the stories unfold. Stopping freshwater adventures bold. With multiple hosts, yeah, the crew's all here. Casting lines in rivers, no need for fear. From the east to the west, we're making waves. Join the tournament hype, see how it raves. Paddle and fin, we're on the go. From the lakes to the oceans, let the good times flow. Fishing tales and triumphs will paint the scene. Jib reviews and profiles, you know what we mean. Bring special guests, every episode shines. This is kayak fishing, where the world aligns.
What is going on, everybody? I am your host, Adam Pross, and I welcome you to the River Run podcast. Thanks, Sean, for stopping by. This episode is going to be a lot of fun. My guest tonight is a aquatic biologist. So, like, this is kind of cool. We're going to talk about, fish handling, fish care, and it doesn't just pertain to rivers. We can use that anywhere we go when we're handling fish, whether it's lakes, ponds, you name it. But yeah, no, thanks for stopping on by. I just want to say one thing. Don't forget, you can also check out the River Run podcast on YouTube, and you can check it out now on Spotify. Definitely head on over to Spotify. I appreciate anybody who wants to tag along and follow. You can stay up to date with all the latest episodes and content that comes out. But yeah, no, also it was cool. One of the things I noticed is just the graph of like how the River Run podcast is listened to and whatnot. And I looked down and I was like, oh, that's just Japan. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're in Japan, hit me up. Like, I think that's super cool. I appreciate everybody who listens to US, Canada, Japan. Like, this is super awesome. But yeah, no, at the end of it, it's going to be a good time. And so why don't we get Sean on the show? Because you know what? Enough about me, and let's bring Sean on and let's chat with Sean. Sean, what's going on, man?
My name's pronounced Shan.
Shane, sorry.
That's all right. Everybody messed it up. It's like Shane with no E or Shannon with no N-O-N. It's just Shan.
I'm horrible with names. I do apologize.
No worries. Everybody does it.
Hey, but yeah, no, thanks for stopping on by the River Run podcast. And, as people might know you too, also from social media, and the fact that you are an aquatic biologist, you use that on your social media follows and feeds and whatnot. So, I just thought you were just one of those people that'd be a great fit for the show, like, especially when we were chatting backstage about just, fish care and whatnot. But yeah, if you want to give for the people who might not know you, if you want to give out, I'll let you take the stage.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. My name's Shan O'Gorman, and I started a page on social media about 5 years ago now, called Aquatic Biologist, because I felt like there was a lack of that type of information. And I think it's really important information for people to have. I had a really good teacher. I went to the University of Georgia and majored in fisheries there. through the forestry school.
Okay. Right on.
So I was an avid fisherman my whole life. Grew up in the country. There wasn't much to do, so the ponds around the house we frequented daily in the summertime. And I'm old. I'm 53 years old, so I can remember the 80s very well. I was an avid bass fisherman in the 80s, and over all the years, you watch television and you watch all the fishing shows and you read all the fishing magazines, and it gives you kind of a false sense of security, I think,
Okay.
about your knowledge on that, because I learned very quickly at university that they did not touch on a lot of things that are just basic facts, that every fisherman should know. And I learned within 10 seconds of listening to the teacher, the first class, I was like, wow, I had this attitude, like I'm going to breeze through this. Like I have all this information, and man, I was wrong. I was
Really?
way wrong. Yeah. And after the first day of school, I was like, man, I've got a lot of work to do. These guys are breaking down fish, and every fish too. And like, heck, man, for about a year, we didn't even study any fish that had been alive for 1,000,000 years.
Wow. Oh, so
Yeah.
you guys were going like prehistoric. We're talking here.
Exactly.
Very cool.
We learned the history of fishes, I mean, it was
Awesome.
crazy. Yeah. So, but Dr. Gilbert taught the pond management class that was one of the first classes I took in the forestry school. And like I said, I primarily base my social media presence around that class. I loved it so much. I actually took the class as a student and then went to Dr. Gilbert. And for my last 2 years at school there, I was like a unofficial TA, like a student assistant for the class. I kind of knew what I was going to do. I was very fortunate to get into pond management for a living for 20 years, and that's what brought me right here.
Right on, man. So I got to ask you though, like, like when you're talking about growing up, and was fishing something that you were just always into? Were you kind of like, because like growing up for me, like I got to go out and fish, but like I'll be honest with you, I fished at the cottage, or I fished when I was with somebody who was going to go fishing. It wasn't like something I did regularly, but I was always this kid who was just so interested in nature, whether it was like, snakes, frogs, the bugs, you name it. Like, I love to be outside. And I think now in my 40s, it's like I've kind of gone, I don't know, I don't want to say back that way, but like I've always enjoyed being outside, but I enjoy it so much more now because I'm just so eager to learn about what's going on around me. And, and I think as an angler, I think it's so important that like it's really interesting, like about the fish, like whether it's a largemouth, smallmouth, a trout or whatever you're into, but like to really understand the idea of like its ecosystem as a whole, why it does the things that behavior wise, the food consumption, the when you talk about, mother nature as a whole, what's going on. Like there's a lot that like I think about now that I could say probably 5 years ago I probably didn't really think about.
Sure, yeah. Well, that's the great thing about fishing too. It's a sport that you can do your whole life. There's not many sports like that. I think golf, I think, can be considered like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, to answer your question, yes. Like I said, I grew up in the very, very rural part of Georgia. It's not rural anymore, but back then it was a very rural part of Georgia, and there was just not much going on. So fishing it was just a way to entertain yourself,
Yeah.
just something to do. And my grandfather and my father got me into it, and I saved my birthday money and stuff. I was 10 years old when I bought my first Team Daiwa combo.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've always done it, and I haven't always, I haven't always been. There was a period there once I graduated, and was managing ponds that I went 12 years in a row fishing at least 5 days a week because I could do it at work.
Well, and I think even like not everybody has that ability where they can say like they can kind of in some ways get paid to fish, whether, maybe being a professional angler, I guess,
Right.
but to do something with a good sense of purpose, you know what I mean? Like you're not just you're doing your own research, but your own research is reflecting that of your passion, but at the same time it's giving other people the knowledge that you want to promote the conservation of, whether it's a certain type of fish or, a topic related to it. You know what I mean? Like, I think as anglers, like it's also like we have a duty, in some ways to also be, guardians of these fisheries. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah.
conservation, like, yeah, we have conservation agents and, there's loads of research and whatnot, but like anglers, you're out there all the time. Like you're probably going to see it first, and you might see things that you don't understand, but, people like you who spend all this time trying to figure out why things happen or whatnot, I think that's a pretty cool job to have,
It's been I'm very fortunate. It's kind of my thing, and it just matches my personality and me. Like to quote Hunter Thompson, it's the American dream in action.
All right, I like that. I really like that. Um, can I like so like as you now, you were talking about like you manage ponds and lakes and whatnot. The are like when you're managing these ponds and whatnot, like what does that involve? Like how do you go about that? Like I'm actually kind of interested about this.
Okay, so we touched on a little bit about in the chat in behind the scenes there before we got going about how bass evolved in rivers, and all the ponds in Georgia are man-made, and all the lakes in Georgia are man-made. And now I live in North Florida. Maybe not every single place is man-made. There's some more natural habitats, but there's also a lot of man-made lakes. So I think that's the first thing that I had an aha moment in school when that just clicked in my mind. It's like, we're actually taking a predator from a river and putting it into a still water, right?
Yeah.
And it's a man-made environment, right? It's not self-managing, right? And I get a lot of, this is from 30 years of experience doing this stuff now. I get a lot of folks, a lot of, blowback, I guess is the best way to put it, about, oh, the fish will manage themselves. It's Mother Nature will take care of everything. Not in a man-made environment.
That's like an aquarium if you think about it.
Right. It's just a big aquarium, really, when you think about it that way, right? So no, you're taking them from the place they evolved and putting them into something man-made. And when you do that, that requires a type of management. That's not the same type of management that we're going to use to manage the river.
No.
Right? It's not. It's a different environment, and it's definitely not the same. Like there's a definite difference between, say, a 4-species pond system that I stock, a simple system, and a 200 species, 10,000 or 50,000 or whatever acre reservoir. Right? Wow. Those aren't managed the same way either.
No.
So the first thing that I see when is people, they tend to try to lump all that together to try to oversimplify it, and you can't. And then that goes back into what I like to call a rubber stamp. And I'll just pick on catch and release a little bit. I'm not a big fan of it. We can touch on that if you'd like. I'm not saying you shouldn't release some of the fish. You definitely should. But there's also there's been such a push towards that that people don't understand fish population dynamics. Some harvest is sometimes necessary. Okay. So as a matter of fact, I was out in Idaho doing some trout fishing with my buddy Kevin, and on the flight back, I got seated next to a lady who happened to be a fish biologist for the state of Oregon for 25 years.
Oh,
We had a wonderful conversation about how trout fishermen don't keep trout like they used to, and they're having stunting problems in their river. They would actually get better growth from out of the trout, and have larger, healthier fish if there was some harvest. You have to think about the forage base, whether it's in a pond, a river, or a lake. I guess the best way to visualize it is like a pie, right? It has limited space, limited amount. So if we had a pie sitting between the two of us, right, we could just cut it in half and both of us get plenty.
There you go. Yeah.
The more people you add, the more pieces of pie you cut up, the less we get to eat.
Exactly.
And then you have to understand, the more you feed a fish, the bigger and faster it grows. The less you feed it, the slower it grows. And it will get to a point where it will stop growing, right? It can grow forever, but it can also stop growing when it lacks food resources. That's a really important thing to understand, right? So in my ponds, and my simple versions of my examples, in my world, to touch on your question, like that's a roundabout way to get to there, but the pond, base of the food chain in a pond is plankton, right? It floats in the water.
Okay.
And there's two basic types of plankton, hundreds of species, but two basic types, phytoplankton and zooplankton. And the amount of plankton in the water will directly it's direct drive. It's like if you have low plankton density, you have low fish population density. If you have high plankton density, you'll have a higher fish population density.
All right. Yeah.
My ponds in Georgia, I can just give you straight numbers, and I know those. An unmanaged, just regular pond, you haven't touched it, you've stocked it properly, but it's just sitting there, on average in Georgia will hold 100 pounds of fish per acre.
Wow.
Okay. If I come in with a management program, and in Georgia, fertilization of ponds can be done. We have low productivity there. It's considered low productivity. It's not very many fish per acre.
Mm-hmm.
So if I added a feeder to my pond, which is feeding the bluegill, which is this next kind of up in line in the food chain there. We got the plankton, then aquatic insects, then bluegill. And the bluegill feed on the insects and the plankton, and the bass feed on the bluegill. That's a simple pond food chain. So take our 100 pounds of fish per acre pond and add a feeder, or manage the plankton with fertilization, just adding nutrients to the plankton. There's special fertilizers that you can use. I can boost that plankton density, right? And I can go from 100 pounds of fish per acre to 400 pounds of fish per acre. So it's significant, right?
Oh, man.
I can 4 times the amount of fish swimming around.
Crazy.
Now, the next fact you need to understand is that doesn't mean the fish will be bigger. If you have a fish balance issue, say a stunted bass population, which is very common, it's always been thrown back, they've never been harvested. You got a lot of 1 pound fish, bass, and maybe a couple big bass that get lucky and can eat those smaller bass and the bit larger bluegill that are there. But that's a real common problem that you have. If you had that in the 100 pounds of fish per acre scenario, and you just boost it with, say, fertilization program, you're not going to make those bass any bigger. You're just going to have a lot more 1 pound bass.
Wild.
Okay.
But it makes sense though. Like, you're not really changing anything other than you're adding more fish, which we're going back to the pie. If we added 2 more people to this, we would have not much pie left for us.
Less pie, right?
There you go.
If we added 500 people to it, we're not, and that's kind of where we are. We would starve to death as people, but fish won't starve to death. Actually, you won't actually. Some will, but you won't see it. The turtles will get them, or some predators will get them, and you won't really see a fish kill. And they're really good at just existing on the available protein there. And if you think about it, it's really smart evolutionarily, because they don't grow, therefore they don't have a higher caloric need. They can exist on the small amount of calories that there is available to them.
Interesting.
Right? So this is what I'm talking about. When I was at school, man, I was like, man, I don't know anything. My first day of school blew me away.
And like I never would have thought of that. Like, and for me, like when I see ponds, like I don't where I am, like there isn't really ponds that are stocked with bass. You know what I mean? Like these are ponds that, generally don't have any fish in it. And if it's a pond that somebody's made, we're talking about a pond here that's like in a nice backyard with koi fish in it.
Right.
I always wondered about that. Like,
sport fishing pond,
like
acres of water.
Yeah, and you see those videos where they're stocking it with the plankton, and we're talking about the bluegill, and then we got the bass. But you might have gigantic bass, but you might have a lower population of bass. But you look at those ones that are, like you said, you got a high population, but you're only dealing with 1 to 2 pound fish, and I never really thought of that. Like when you think of stunting the growth, of these fish, and the fact that like they'll survive off the proteins that they have, but the idea that they're not really going to grow. And it's funny because when I think about your conversation regarding catch and release, just going back on that, and harvesting fish, I kind of think of like the cattle idea with like the bulls and whatnot. Like after you've had the big bulls come in, and you kind of wanted like the bloodline or whatnot, and you kind of that he's kind of past his prime, so off he goes. New bull comes in, and you go into that conversation about catch and release, and that was an example somebody had kind of explained it to me as, is that like sometimes you do have to go and harvest, like it needs to happen. Like it's also like the evolution of life, you know what I mean? Like things need to change and whatnot. But catch and release, there's obviously like every fish management program, has a catch and release, whether it's, no fishing during these periods, or, you have only catch and release, from this period to this period. And then you have up in Canada or in Ontario, we have, the period in which that you are allowed to harvest fish, therefore that you can take fish out of the ecosystem, bring them home with you. And, it's for you to do. And I think about, some of the rivers that I fish, and, and I think sometimes, harvest might not be like, and nobody wants to really, nobody wants to kill a fish, you know what I mean? Like, but if you go back in history, when people used to fish, they fished because they needed to eat.
That's exactly right.
And I'm sure a lot of people fish for the hobby of it. Like, if we go way back in history and you think of like the 1800s, and you think of Thaddeus Norris, and he was, the American fly fishing, the father of American fly fishing. He was somebody who was big into the conservation of keeping fish, and, the idea of catch and release, in a time where people literally caught fish because they needed to eat. If you didn't eat, you were not going to survive. You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
think about the ideology. Everybody who fished kept everything that they catch.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Now we've got the opposite. Almost everybody who fishes throws everything back. Right? Yeah. So you've got two ends of the spectrum. And guess what? The truth lies right in the middle. We have to understand that some harvest is necessary, especially in my scenario where I'm trying to grow. Most of the time guys are hiring me to grow big bass, right? Well, so if you want to grow big bass, that understanding that pie theory is very important. We're going to track the weights of the bass, and when they start to slip, we have a measurement called relative weight, and when I can track it, I'll use it like a data set, right? So I'm not guessing, I'm not looking at the fish, I'm looking at numbers. I'm weighing and measuring. And that's going to get us into how to handle these fish, right? Because on our small fish that we're putting in a cooler, who cares? Those are harvested fish. We're going to eat those. That's fish tacos. We're not worried about. That's not what I'm worried about.
Okay. All right.
Right. But we've got some big fish that we want to put back. Right. And that is important. Really, really important that we handle those fish. And that's what the number one pet peeve and what drives me on the internet is when a guy boat flips it onto 150-degree carpet, handles it with dry hands, leaves it out of the water for 5 minutes, then puts it in a live well for the whole afternoon with 8 of its other fish buddies to all hang for one picture, right? It's like you're doing everything possible to kill the fish and then making like a conservationist when you release it and it swims away. And that's another fallacy that I like to just get out there. Just because it swims away does not mean it's going to survive long term.
Yeah. Especially,
we'll break it down. We'll get into that. But before we go there, I wanted to go back to our food chain because we're on a river. This is a river. This is a River Run podcast. So
yes.
Let's talk about the food chain and how it works in a river. Do you know how? You know where that comes from?
Okay. Well, it's got to start somewhere. So where does it start?
Right. Exactly. So we had the plankton in the pond, right? Or in a lake. We got the plankton or in the ocean. You got the whales that filter the plankton out of the ocean. But a river's different. Okay. Not that there won't be plankton in there. There definitely will be plankton in there. And there would definitely be types of insects like a caddisfly.
Yeah.
Builds a web, catches particles that drift by, right? Some of those particles will be zooplankton. Some of those particles will be phytoplankton. Some of those particles will be other organic, things from the river.
Yeah.
But primarily, the base of the food chain in the river starts in that benthic rocky bottom and the algae on that bottom. And it'll get driven off of that. The productivity will come from the rock surface on the bottom of the river. That's the primary driver. So when we understand that, then we understand what a problem sedimentation is.
Oh.
Whenever you put sediment in the river, sand, whatever, you're covering the rocks. And like we talked about, I'll just use examples in real life because that's the best way I operate. I just makes
I like it.
I hate book knowledge. I just tell me what you did in the field,
So
when I was at Georgia, one of the guys getting a master's degree, no, a PhD actually, Dale Jones. Shout out to Dale, good dude.
Okay.
He hired us to help him sample streams. We sampled 36 streams twice a year in the Southern Appalachian Mountains. And we did seine. We had a seine, which is a net, like a long net, and electrofishing, a backpack electrofisher. So we would go upstream. We'd actually seine off a 100-meter section of the stream so the fish couldn't escape one way or another. And then we would electrofish that section of stream. And what we would do is just use the current. And the electrofisher works like a taser. It just stuns the fish. It doesn't kill them. It causes their muscles to expand and contract involuntarily. You've seen people get tased on cops.
Yeah, they just
fish act the same way. Some of them roll up. Some of them, some of the fish run away from it. Some of the fish just roll right up and go into the net. All kinds of random activity from that. But it's a very not completely unbiased, but an unbiased way to sample fish that's not lethal. And that's why we use it. So what we did is we had 3 different sections of these streams that we had to sample. The forested upper sections, like the middle section and the lower section. And generally it was like a forested upper section. The middle section had some kind of agriculture like cattle fields it passed through. And then the bottom section was usually in town.
Wow.
And we were looking at species diversity. So you're talking probably 26 to 36 different species, depending on where you were in the upper section. You're also looking at leaf pack that fell out into the nice cobble substrate, right? No development up there, right? No houses up there. You're up there. You're up in the woods, right? And that leaf pack is very important. That's an energy source for those insects, which then becomes food for your larger fish. As you move down the stream, and we, like I said, let's say 30 species of fish up there. Same stream, move down 5 miles, and it's coming through a cow pasture. And the cows walk in and out right?
Oh, yeah.
You watch a stream go from 30 species, say, to 6
Yeah.
in that section of stream, mostly minnows. I was about to say cyprinids. Maybe some of the viewers don't know cyprinid. So minnows.
Minnows. All right.
Yeah. So it goes to like a completely different looking stream with much less species diversity. And then you go back down into the suburban area. It's going through town. You're spending those cars and people, and you're in the parking lot of the Food Line or whatever, and you're out there doing that. But it's not cattle. It's not bad erosion. Some erosion, but not too bad. Not nearly compared to the cow, pasture part of the stream. And boom, the species diversity jumps back up to like 20, 25 species.
Wow.
So I think that's a really good visual representation to how sediment negatively impacts fish populations in streams and rivers.
And it's funny too, because I was speaking with somebody else, and they're like, especially when you're wading and you're going through and you're fishing and you're kicking up a lot of sediment, like you're going to be pushing a lot of things out because there's just no reason to hang out there. Now,
or you're doing the San Juan shuffle.
That was it. There you go. And that's exactly what I was looking for. And I'll be honest with you, it makes sense though. Like, and especially when you talk about the river, like, the algae, like especially on the bottom, like how like that has to feed something. What eats that has to feed something else. You know what I mean? Like it makes sense, as it flows. And you can see especially when you talk about like the leaf litter and like, all the insects and aquatic vertebrates that are in there that are feeding off of that are attracting, and, whether it's, trout streams, bass or whatever else is coming through there, like things all have to flow together. So if one thing is off, it obviously causes a shift in the overall population, because if one thing can't sustain there, the other thing's not going to hang out there, and then the third thing's not, you know what I mean? Like it's just it's a negative impact.
Let's put some some more facts in there, so just in case we got some kids or some people who are new, don't really understand it.
I like that.
Yeah, so there's you got the algae, right? And you've got an entire food chain of aquatic insects in a stream, and some of them are going to scrape the rock, just scrape the paraphyton is what that's called, like just kind of the biofilm, the slippery. If you step on the rock, it feels slippery. That's what that is.
Okay.
So there's just animals that are going to scrape that, right, and feed in that. And then there's an entire food web of nothing but aquatic insects, many species. Then you'll have, like I said, the caddis will filter the water. They'll build a net and filter the water, and all kinds of everything in between there. And then you also have predatory insects that will feed on other insects. So there's an entire, and that's when you get into when you get out west and you get into the hatch, right? What that means is it's a certain time of year that a certain aquatic insect, like a mayfly, we can all kind of guess when it hatches, and it comes off. What water temperature gets right, sunlight conditions get right, just time of the year gets right, and it's time for that insect to reproduce. So what that looks like is they're all on the bottom doing their thing, doing their scraping or their feeding or their whatever they're doing down there, and they decide to breed. What's going on now is they're going to emerge out of the water. They're going to go to the surface. They're going to fly. They're going to turn into a fly, something that flies around. They're going to mate. Then they're going to land on the water and lay their eggs back in the water. And then typically they're going to die. And I'm being very general. There's difference, but I'm just being very general.
Yeah.
That entire life cycle, right? A lot of different stream insects do like that. And so when you hear someone say the term match the hatch, what they're doing is when the mayflies are hatching and going and spawning and breeding, they're matching the mayfly. But think about that. There's the mayfly that lives on the bottom before the spawn,
Yeah.
There's the mayfly that emerges up to the surface. There's the mayfly that flies around. That's 3 different patterns for one insect.
Yeah, true.
Right? So it's you could be which one are you trying to match, and which are they taking? Are the mayflies emerging? Are they on emergers? Are they flying around and then landing back on the water laying eggs? Well, now you're going to go to a dry fly, right? And that's how trout fishermen, they understand. They're like entomologists. They're like, you have to be very in tune to all of that. And there's a lot to it because there's 100 different species of aquatic insect that can do that.
And I got to give it to like anybody who's done fly fishing or is hardcore into fly fishing, because it is so true. There you have dry flies, wet flies, you know what I mean? You might throw topwater, Euro nymphing, you know what I mean? Like there is so many terms, and it is such a prestigious way of fishing, and there's a lot of conservation that goes into it too, whatnot. But when we talk about the mayfly, I had actually watched a video, Wild Fly, I think it's called, is the YouTube video, sorry, the YouTube channel. And this video is of the Hex mayfly hatching. And these guys are in Michigan. And they're fly fishing at night, and it's going off, and it is the most insane thing. And these are, I guess this is like one of the biggest mayflies, is the Hex mayfly.
Yeah.
And like they were, like you said, it was like calm, and then you could start to see it in the sky, and then all of a sudden it was pitch black. Turn a flashlight on. Oh my gosh. They were everywhere, hitting the water, and the fish were literally just taking. And I was like, it was the craziest thing I think I've ever seen. And so it's just funny that you're just using a reference of the mayfly hatching and whatnot, and to have that's a pretty neat thing.
It's cool, man. To see. Yeah, and when you I've seen rivers, like I can remember several times, like on the Bighorn in eastern Montana. I've been out there, and you get up in the morning, and you're going down to the river, and you look at the river, maybe you're a couple hundred yards away walking in, and it looks foggy, and it's not fog. And then you get there and you're like, oh my God, look at the fish feeding everywhere. Look at all these bugs everywhere. And then you throw every fly in your tackle box and can't get a bite. Yeah. But that's a different story.
You want do they want the real fly or the fly that gets thrown at them? You know what I mean? I always wondered that. And, but yeah, no, like it's interesting, like how ecosystems, especially in rivers and whatnot, just talking about, the whole idea of plankton all the way into, your aquatic invertebrates, and that idea, aquatic insects, too, the aquatic species that feed on them moving forward, you can see why, going back to what we were talking about, everything kind of has to fall in place. You change one thing and everything has some sort of setback in its ecosystem. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, it's very important too to understand. I think that was the thing they drove into us very well at school. Understanding the system completely, and to understand it. That's what I try to bring to the guys that fish. I can't teach you how to be a better fisherman, right? I'm not that good at fishing. I'm not a professional fisherman or anything like that. I've done a lot of fishing, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm some expert teacher at fishing. But I think I'm good at what we're doing right now and relating
you really are.
common language to very technical scientific stuff that a lot of guys don't. They kind of start talking over everyone's head, because it doesn't take very many terms to throw somebody off, to turn somebody off. I've seen it when other scientists speak, and they go into terminology. And it's like, they're not going to understand that terminology, so you're really not educating anyone, right? Yeah. And that's how I got here was pond management and having to help people with their ponds. And some of the people I'd be consulting with them, as they're doing it yourselfers. and they're paying me a small consulting fee, but I'm not actually doing the work. So for 30 years, I've taken people on like that, and I've had to explain this stuff in a way that somebody who's never studied it could understand it.
Yeah, because you have a person who's probably like, hey man, like I want to grow, like I want big bass, like I want to have a big bass pond, and I want to be able to go in there, and he's probably not gonna understand, like, and like I'll be honest with you, if you wanted to go into like the real technical aspect of it, I would probably sit back here and be like, okay, good.
It'll
Give me a
get too
second.
boring.
I'm gonna have to Google this because like I'm really not sure what.
Mhm.
But like the way you break it down, it's awesome, man. Like you take like you're taking the time just to get on somebody else's level, and like anglers, I think, and I don't want to say all anglers because it's not all. Like I'm an angler, and I enjoy understanding my ecosystem. I understanding the fish that I love to catch, river smallmouth. I love trying to understand. And I remember years ago, my friend Travis Myers, he said to me, before you can understand the owl, you have to understand the mouse. You got to understand what the owl eats. And I was like,
Right.
man, that really makes a lot of sense. And I remember going back and being like, okay, like okay, the smallmouth, hold on here. What does the smallmouth eat?
Mhm.
What does that eat?
Right.
Why does that eat? Why does that do,
Right.
And it was one of those things that like it just it put the light went on, and it was, I'll be honest with you, I have, to this day, I still go out there and I'm still fascinated by why these things are happening. I still spend countless hours reading about, behavior and fishing reports and whatnot. But it was one of those things to me that I began more and more interested in. And I think I became less interested in the reel and the rod and the
Right.
chatterbait or the swim bait, and I was like, well, like I understand that, but like I want to understand why this is happening. Why, and I talking to another buddy, and he's like, yeah, man, like, we were kind of going around the same conversation. And I was like, yeah, like, yeah, I'm more, and he's like, man, I just feel like everybody's like looking for like how to catch a fish. Everybody just wants to know like what rod, what reel I need, and what size line did you catch that on, and what size weight. And it's like, yeah, but like that's a whole nother ecosystem. Like that doesn't,
Yeah.
that's not the no, like
That's not my thing. I'm touching on, you just reminded me of something. So I can tie this in.
That's
So
all
like
right.
water temperature, right? And you guys are in cold, frozen tundra up there, and
Very tundra.
the season's going to start warming back up soon, right? So
We're
what
kind of
does
fluctuating.
right?
We're all over the place.
Right?
Mother Nature.
But so 50-degree water, what does that mean to you? When you
So
see
when you talk like 50-degree water, like that's actually like we're talking like that's cold. You know what I mean? Like we're we could be almost being into like ISO, like, you know what I mean? Like you're in the low 40s, like we're not we're past frozen, we're low 40s into the 50s, you know what I mean? That's still chilly water, you know what I mean? Like that's not warm water for us.
right, but there's one thing in particular that I'm thinking of that would make me tie on a pattern for smallmouth when the water crosses 50 degrees. Do you want to know what that is? Because remember,
Sure.
like you said, the owl and the mouse, right? You got to understand the mouse. Crawfish emerge and start spawning, start breeding at 50 degrees.
Okay. So yeah, see, and I didn't realize this until I was talking with Travis, and he had said, he's like, a lot of people forget about the spawn.
Mm.
And the one spawn is the crawdad spawn. And I'm like,
Mhm.
crawdad spawn? He's like, yeah, and it usually happens when the water gets into the 50s.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I know, like, I'm like, what? Like, hold it. And he's like, it's a real thing. And he's like,
Oh yeah,
and
that's very real.
when he caught on to it, and I was, man, like, I never would have thought of that. And yet people like well, I'm sure lots of people know, but like, you know, like it's just interesting that the one thing, like I wouldn't expect the crawdad spawn to happen at that time, you know what I mean?
Well, understand this though. It's not they store the sperm. It's not like baby crawfish are swimming everywhere. They hatch out. They ride on the mother's back and don't hatch out for a longer, like spiders that don't hatch out. They're not everywhere, but they're out. They're coming out of their burrows and they're emerging and they're reproducing at that 50-degree water. So I'm looking for crawfish activity right then. And then I'm looking at, it's going to depend on the substrate that they're in as to the color of the crawfish because they've been in a burrow.
Oh.
Right? So they've been filtering water that came through the soil. And that, like around here, it'll change them red because they're in clay soil.
Where some, I think it's in the Appalachians or in West Virginia or whatnot, they almost come out black because of.
Oh yeah, well that's another thing too. Now we're kind of getting more into lakes and rivers, but the crawfish, like if you say you have a really stained lake, right? Well, the stained lake, the muddy water is going to limit the light penetration. The limited light penetration reduces the plant growth. The lack of plant growth changes the vitamins and the things that the crawfish is scraping and eating and changes their colors to blue and black.
Which would make sense where green pumpkin comes in a high vegetation area because
there you go.
Have
you a smart guy.
Man, I'll be honest with you. I didn't even that's funny, like because I was like,
you gotta understand the mouse, bro.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this because as much like I said, I'm fascinated by this stuff, and that's why I like talking to people about, you know.
Like I said, man, I can't tell you how to go drag whatever, but I can give you this. And this will give you confidence, and confidence will make you better.
And I'm sure a lot of people, that's what I mean. Like a lot of people would step back and they'd be like, well, you know, oh, it says you have to have this color and that, but if you actually went and tried to understand,
start digging around in the rocks, man, just pick them up. Look what's there, you know. They make little seines, they make little dip nets for the river, you know, little small seines that you can use to see what's floating down there. Use all those things, you know, let it tell you what's going on.
I've actually brought my snorkel, and I've done that because I want to know. Like I've always, you know, and so I remember it was a hot day, so I was like, cool, like, you know, I want to understand what's going on around here, and I did, and it was interesting to see. Like you wouldn't think in, you know, a fast flowing river, you know, what actually might be underneath, you know. And like you said, if you just moved a couple of rocks, you'd be surprised about who was hiding underneath there, and you wouldn't know because you wouldn't take the time to look and try and understand it. Like that's why I think sometimes we're just so focused on how we can catch the fish with the lure and having the right rod and everything, that we choose to completely leave out the ecosystem as a whole and trying to understand where we're actually fishing and why these things are happening. But yeah, I really think and that's why I like too, like, you know, you brought something up here, and like, you know, fish handling and fish care is always, to me, has been something, you know, depending on where I'm going, what I'm doing, you know, simple things is, you know, like for instance, like washing down my kayak going between different river systems, you know, like that's a big thing, and that's something that, you know, I've spoken with other people about. You know, for instance, like especially when I catch fish, like, you know, and I try to get them in as quick as I can, and I try to keep them in the water as hook done, snap a picture, you know, put them back, you know, like I don't really need to.
Well, you know, that leads us to fish physiology, right? And let's talk about that. Let's talk about, like, from my perspective. And again, my job was to stock people's ponds. And what does that mean? That means that I have to go somewhere. I have to get thousands of fish. I have to put them into a tank, and I have to take them hours and hours to the pond, and I have to put them in there, and I have to do all that, and I have to get enough of them to survive to make it worth that man's money. If I pour a bunch of dead fish in there, I'm not getting paid.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to do that successfully. On top of that, I have to conduct an electrofishing survey. I have to put the boat in. We talked about the backpack, but there's also a boat electrofisher as well for lakes.
Oh, Jesus.
And I had that. And so now we're going to be tasing the fish, catching it in a net, bringing it into a tank on the boat, right? Keeping it alive there. Understanding how many fish that I can keep in, you can overload a tank. That's the first thing. That's the first place we should start, especially for the bass guys who are tournament fishermen guys. They don't seem to understand, like, 1 pound of fish per gallon is the maximum that I would ever. Actually, I'd rather, if I'm bringing you fish for your pond, I would rather be under that, like a half a pound of fish per gallon, right?
Wow.
The fish's gills are so efficient at taking oxygen out of the water that if you overload it with more fish than that, they'll remove the oxygen. They'll all be oxygen stressed or suffocate completely, even with an aerator running.
Wow.
And I've had guys just argue with me till no end about that, but that's a fact. I mean, every single pro fish hauler who has ever taken a fish anywhere in the country knows that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important information for everyone to have, that you can have an aerator running. Say you've got 6 bass that are 5 pounds. That's 30 pounds of fish. If you have a 20-gallon live well, that's not enough water. That's not enough tank. They're going to be oxygen stressed.
And I don't. I'm not a tournament angler by any means, but one of the things that I'm not interested in seeing. Don't get me wrong. There's some, phenomenal fishermen and women out there, but I gotta say, one of the poorest parts that I see is these live wells that are, like, so overpacked with fish.
Mm-hmm.
And these fish are in there for, X amount of hours.
Sorry, man.
No worries.
Hold on.
And
You're right back.
all right, no worries. Like, it's one of these things, you kind of see it and you're like, man, like, that's a lot of fish in a little spot, and they're getting plowed around for hours. I don't know what you guys think about that, but for me, it's one of those things that, like, I don't really enjoy seeing that, because it's like, I think of that, like, how stressed out all that is for those fish, and then come weigh-in time, and then you're wondering, like, how many boats are in that tournament, how many fish are actually going to get back into that ecosystem and actually make it. Oh, hold on here. He's going to come back in. Oh, hold on.
How about now?
Okay, there you go. There you go.
On my end, my bad. I unplugged it. You'd think I was better at this after 100 of these, but I'm not. Sorry.
Fair enough, man. Like, nobody's like a Joe Rogan here, okay? Like, this is
right.
This isn't a Joe Rogan podcast, and if that's what you're looking for, you can go find his show.
And I bet that phone hasn't rang in like 3 days. And the minute I get onto a pod, here it is ringing.
No worries, dude. Like, it's all good. This is all part of the experience,
All right.
But yeah,
you're exactly right. It drives me crazy. And when we talk, let's just go there and talk about some safe fish handling, and then you guys can have a pet peeve like me whenever you see this nonsense, and you know, hey, that's not the way you do this, right? Mm-hmm. So the first thing we have to understand is fish have a slime coat, right? You touch a fish, it feels slimy. Why? Do you know why?
It's a protective barrier, is it not?
It is.
It's
That's
what's
exactly
protecting. It's for, I believe, like amphibians have that too. Like frogs have
sure.
like a slime to protect their skin. Well, to keep them from getting sick, is from the way I understood it.
That's
Fish are the
exactly right.
same way. Northern pike are very slimy, and
Mhm.
you know, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's gross," and it is. It's it's fish slime, but that slime is a protective barrier
Very
for.
important barrier between the water. And imagine this. Imagine if you fell down outside and you scraped your knee. Are you going to go use pond water to clean it or river water to clean that cut every week, every day for a week? You got to clean up your knee. Probably the worst water you could use, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like,
Bacteria and that kind of stuff in there.
yeah,
Same for the fish. That bacteria is there for them too. So the first thing that happens is you start to see bacterial infections when fish are put on dry ground, handled with dry hands. You do not want the fish to touch a dry surface if we're trying to keep it alive, right? Because that's if our main goal. If we're putting them in a cooler and putting them in fish tacos, doesn't matter.
hey,
But
it is what it is.
that's exactly right. But if we're trying to keep the fish alive, and here's the thing about a bacterial infection, they're going to swim away 100% of the time. Then they're going to go back into the water because they've been manhandled with dry crap, flipped on a dry carpet, handled with dry hands.
Yeah.
Okay. That peels it. Think about peeling a banana. It's peeling the slime off just like that.
Ugh.
Okay. So now you put him back in the water and say you boat flipped him, or one of these, I don't boat flip them, but some jackleg boat flips one and its side lays onto the dry boat carpet. Well, now its entire side is dry. That's going back and getting a bacterial infection, but it's not happening in the 30 seconds you're watching it swim away. That takes weeks, right? So that's delayed mortality is what we call that.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a big contributing factor to delayed mortality is bacterial infections. And you see the cottony looking almost rust colored or white, like ick looking stuff.
Yeah.
All those attached cottony looking, or sometimes they're just brown, like things clinging on, like almost like weird looking alien stuff.
Yeah.
All different types of bacterial infections, and that's poor fish handling. Okay, so if we're going to catch a big fish and put him back, but we're putting him back and he's getting sick, guess what? He's not growing.
Yeah.
You're shooting yourself in the foot. Now you've got a fish that's fighting an infection instead of using the nutrients and the protein that it's taking in to grow. It's using the food that it takes in. Its immune system's fired up and it's got to burn energy to fight that infection. Now back to our tanked bass, right? We're putting tank fish in a tank.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we're perfect, even if our oxygen levels are perfect and we don't overhaul the tank, even if we handle them perfectly with dry hands and wet surfaces and don't do any of that, right? But we have 3 times we've caught the bass 3 times in the same growing season, right? And put it into a tank.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what the mortality rate is for that fish? 3 times in one season.
Gonna say pretty high.
90%.
Yeah.
Is a 10% chance of living if it's tanked 3 times in the same summer. That'll change your perspective on a fish tournament, won't it?
Yeah, definitely, man. Like,
yeah.
And you,
even if you do it perfectly,
yeah,
even if you're the best fish handler, the more you tank them. So now think about this. You got the guys that are holding 5 big bass up at the end of the day, and they're all, these pictures on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
How long do they stay in the tank? Right?
8-hour tournament, let's say.
Well,
all day Saturday.
Bass in a 20-gallon tank for 8 hours.
Yep.
Okay, so now they're oxygen stressed, and they're probably bacterial infections because you probably didn't handle them with wet hands. You probably grabbed the first couple of them, or dropped them on the boat or did whatever, right? You probably didn't handle them exactly perfect, right? So that mortality is going higher than 90%. For what, though? For what? A picture for Instagram? It's not even a fishing trip. Can't even win any money with that. You know,
so
when I see those pictures, that goes through my mind.
Well, and you bring up like a good point too, because like not even just boat anglers. We have kayak anglers, we have canoeing, we have all this, and like when you really think of it, the surface is a surface here. So like whether you're putting these fish into live wells, you're tanking them, or you're throwing them on a catch board or hog trough that you haven't haven't wet. You're so pumped to catch the fish. You gotta get that picture. You gotta throw your phone up and boom, you throw it down. Oh, it's summertime, by the way. It's like we're talking like it's 30, but it feels like it's bright and sunny outside. So like we're into like 40, and it's sweltering outside. And you take that fish and you throw them on there. It's the same thing.
It's the exact same thing. Now you're the smallmouth guy, so let's talk about that, right? Because this is important for largemouth. Any kind of fish you're going to live. Jaws. Their jaw is very delicate.
Yeah.
And it's how they feed. It's how they survive. If you sprain it or break it, they're cooked. That's it. You might as well put them in fish tacos if you break their jaw. Or actually, and everybody knows a sprained ankle can be worse than a broken one sometimes. So if you sprain their jaw, you're in the same ballpark. Now, the bigger the fish gets, the more important this becomes. Right? You have a light little half a pound bass, right? Grabbing him by the lip and picking him up. That's not putting much pressure. He doesn't have much rear end behind there. You got a 4 pound, 5 pound smallie,
and
you're dangling it by the jaw, or you're taking it and you're wrenching it. You know how they do this?
Yeah.
To put the weight on the fish's weight against the jaw, it'll paralyze him. Yeah, it'll paralyze him because it's about to break their jaw. And you break it, he's dead. Right?
Yeah.
So our second hand, very important. It's doing two things. It's coming up under you, get into the belly, right? Not on the tail, not down on the caudal fin. I want a wet hand on the belly of the fish for two reasons. It's taking pressure off the jaw, right? You're doing a lot of jaw protection by helping him lift by the belly, and fish are designed to be floating in water. When you remove them from the water, all their internal organs sag. So that lift of the belly is you need to get up there and pick those organs up. And that's going to help protect from any internal damage while the fish is out of the water.
Interesting. See, another thing to be fair, like when I would usually pick out, like, so for instance, if fish is in the net, I always go two hands and I'll pick him or whatever. But I never realized that, like, the idea that their organs would actually like sag all the way through. But if you think as a human being picked up, if you were picked up like on like a bench press, let's say, you'd be picked up evenly. I would say
to be out of the water. Imagine we were pulling G's.
Yeah.
Right. You get internal damage from pulling G's. It's not much difference, really.
And another thing I always thought about too, and this is a conversation I had with a buddy of mine, is we talked about the idea of, when you catch, when you caught a fish, big fish, and that fish is like working himself hard. You know what I mean? Like he or she's trying to get away, like, and the whole time you're running, let's say, lighter line, lighter tackle, lighter hooks, and you almost got to play that fish. You know what I mean? Like you gotta like, okay, oh, he's gotta take it easy. Okay, that's more energy that's being drawn out of that fish for you to finally get him in there, and then you throw him up, or you take your picture and then you throw him back in there. Well, he or she's just, ran on the treadmill for like, 100 kilometers an hour right there. And then no break. Do you throw them right back? No care, no handling taken. the survival rate of that to turn out, after hearing what we're learning now too, is that, with fish slime and fish care handling, the idea that, that mucus membrane that's on them, we've taken off, and it's like we gotten into the conversation that through all of it, it's like, well, why not just run, like, why does it have to be like such light stuff? And that's a rabbit hole within itself.
Well, I can add to it. Imagine this: you're on a treadmill and you sprint. Think about, like you said, the fish is fighting for its life. Basically, it's trying to get away, so it's exerting maximum effort. For how long? 30 seconds? A minute and 30 seconds? 2 minutes?
Let's say it takes you 5 minutes to get the fish in.
Say it takes 5 minutes to get the fish in. Go and sprint on your treadmill for 5 minutes like you're running for your life. And as soon as you get off, put a plastic bag over your head, because that's what's happening to the fish.
Exactly.
He's got no oxygen when you take him out of the water. So you have to consider that, right? And then, so I like to let them rest in the net. You got them in, especially in a kayak, right? You got them in the net. You've landed the fish, right? Just let them sit in the water, sit in the net. They can breathe in there. They can relax in there. The lactic acid can go down in there, right? Now, if you just pop the hook, pick up the fish, it's out of the water for 3 seconds, and you put it back, I got no problems. I would rather have it back in the water like that than flopping around the bottom of the kayak while you're getting your catch board out, while you're getting out your crap, you're turning on your camera, and the fish fought for its life, and now it's not breathing. For how much longer, right? So the general rule that I like to tell my guys on the fish we're managing, we don't want them out of the water longer than 30 seconds.
So I think like this is just such good information, because it's horrifying to see those photos, and it happens, where you pick a fish up out of the net, and you've done it right, and all of a sudden, and smallmouth are notorious for, they got more energy than they know what to do with, and you try to put them on a catch board, and it's like, they don't want to sit still. They're flip-flopping all over the place, and next thing you know, this fish is like flip-flopping inside of your kayak, and you can just wonder, like, how much damage is it doing to itself? Because really right now he's just trying to get away. Like, just wants to go back to its ecosystem. It does not want to be on your kayak. And like, I won't lie, like, I'm completely guilty of being there and trying to, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it bounces, and I'd rather it just bounce off and go back in the water. But you know what I mean? It doesn't happen. It's it's flip-flopping all over the place. I tell people all the time, give it a couple of minutes to just hang out in the net. You don't need to just throw them up on the leaderboard or the catch board and snap. Like, give him time. Like, it's better for you. It'll work better for you, and it'll work better for the fish if you give him a chance just to chill out. And while he's like trying to do a burnout in your net, isn't the time you want to be trying to handle him and put him on a leaderboard, and it's even like when you see, like, for instance, like when you see guys boat flip fish, and the rod goes up, and he's like, here we go, and like, you're thinking that this fish that's, let's say, like, I don't know, we'll just go 4 pounds, let's say, or 3 pounds, and you're boat flipping this thing on, I don't know, whatever size line, whatnot you're running, and you're kind of like halfway up, and then you're at that oh shoot point, because you're like, oh man, am I going to break my rod? And then you're grabbing the line, and then everything's slipping down, and then boom, fish is on the deck. It's flip-flopping everywhere going, and it's like, yeah, like, how much more damage can, it's on carpet though. But it's not. It's
dry
like
carpet. Is it wet or
dry
dry?
carpet.
Yeah,
How much of that jaw have you just overextend, and then you catch a fish where you've seen it it's like its face got jacked. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I caught a
Yeah.
largemouth a couple of years ago, and I called him like Bassenstein because he was just like Frankenstein. Like he was just so like, and it was because clearly somebody like jacked his face one day, and like I'll be honest with you, I caught him on a drop shot, and I was like, is something like nibbling on my line right now? Because instead of it just inhaling it, because bass come around and they take it. This thing was like, it was like trying to get it with its bottom lip where it couldn't. So it looked like this.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was like, what is this? So I just set the hook, and I'm like, oh yeah. And I brought this thing up, and I'm telling you, I was like, oh my gosh. It was like completely front side of it Bassenstein, as I called it. And yeah, and it just makes me wonder, like, and in with all this is like, if you are in like fishing is a passion. Fishing is something to me that like I go out and I love to do. But if you don't take care of the fish, good luck with your ecosystem, because when you take one thing out, and it obviously, like, I don't want to say like it would be like a very sudden decline, but like, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't just starting with our conversation. This is something that like I really think is a great conversation for so many people and so many organizations out there, you
Oh yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and with so many people who want to get into um fishing, whether it's tournament fishing or kayak fishing, whatever. Like, these are great open conversations to have, because it is so important, that really at the end of the day, whether you fish out of a boat, kayak, or you wade or you fly fish or whatever, you're all out there for the same reason. You're all out there to catch fish, because you all enjoy the same passion of the sport of fishing. And it's one of those things that I think sometimes we kind of neglect that, and it may not be, we may be guilty of it because we were, oh, I can't wait to, like, I got to see this thing, you know what I mean? But really, at the end of the day, we need to step back and think like kind of what I was going with, like, is it really that, like, do you really need that time to get that fish on the board right away? No, you could let it just hang out in the net, chill out. And when you think about it, think of it this way: you run 100 kilometers on the treadmill, and then just go throw a bag over your head.
Yeah. Well, and that, when you were talking there, it kind of reminded me of another point that I wanted to make. And it's going back to where we first were. And I said I was a fisherman for my whole life since the 80s. And I've been doing it a long time. Okay. Well, so are from a lot of other guys. And I didn't realize until I got into fisheries school really how much I didn't understand, right? You don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly.
And so now at this point, we have decades and decades and 4 decades, 5 decades of bad fish handling that's been ingrained into these guys. And it's how it's always been done. Therefore, it's correct. You see what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
go around and around with them. And it's not, I don't care how long you've been doing it wrong, right?
Doesn't make it right.
50%. What did that guy say? 50% right is 100% wrong every time. And that's what I see. It's about 50% right. It's like, yeah, no, you're not. And it's not really like the pro, like I've been to the St. John's down there. I've watched the pro guys come in. They've got state-of-the-art fish tanks and oxygen bottles, and that I'm not worried about that group of fishermen. There's not even enough of them running enough tournaments to even matter. They're not going to hurt the fish population. And let me define hurt the fish population. They're never going to eradicate the bass population with poor fish handling. They're not going to kill the population. They give themselves more credit. Like, you're not going to go harvest all the bass out of a lake. That is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. You're not that good. Okay. You're giving yourself too much credit. But what you are going to do and what you are doing, what those tournaments are doing. Like, I can remember the 80s. I can remember the few bass club. I was in a bass club for a while. I can remember back as it came up. There wasn't 200 boats 3 days a week blasting off out there, right? It wasn't big like it is now. There wasn't the pressure. Now, again, they can get 2,000 boats. You're not going to kill the fish population. But if you think about it like a pyramid, right?
Mm-hmm.
The base of the pyramid are the small fish, and the big fish are the peak of the pyramid. Much fewer big fish at the top as compared to the fish at the bottom, right? So when we factor all these things together, what you're doing is you're rounding off the top of the pyramid.
That is so well put. So well put.
And you're skewing your bass population towards small fish with this fish handling techniques. With like, I like MLF. They put them back. They put them back quick. They don't haul them around in the tanks all day long, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we could just get like steps in that direction where they're not being tanked. So if they are caught 3 times in the summer, they're not going to die because they've just spent hopefully a minute and a half out of the water, not 36 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If we could just get that, guess what happens to the peak of our pyramid?
It starts to climb.
It starts to climb back up. And then we get away from the idea that catch and release is the end-all be-all solution to managing fisheries, because what you're doing, you're just putting back the base of the pyramid, right? You're naturally skewing the top down, and you're doing nothing down here to the base. So you're literally managing the fishery for smaller fish. If you reverse that and you got better fish handling that made the top fish survive, and you had some harvest at the bottom to get everything growing a little bit faster, to get them up to the peak faster, now you're managing the fishery for bigger fish.
I have to say, you brought up a good point though. And MLF, that is definitely one that I remember watching. And it was one of the things that I always thought was unique is, because when you think of bass tournaments, what's the pride of a bass tournament, right? The pride of the bass tournament is the team or the guy, and he's got his fish. Like that's what you see. You don't see the boat. You don't see how he caught it. Or how she caught it. It's the fish. That's what you see. And you see 5 fish or 4 fish or however many hanging there, and they are at this point, they are traveled all day. And, MLF, I always took interest to. Fish comes up. Yeah. Okay. Boom. 2 pounds. Cool. It back in the water. Amazing.
Yeah.
And
there's a great biologist I got to talk to, meet, Stephen Barden. You've seen Steve stuff, Texas Pro Lake.
Okay.
He's tied in with the MLF guys. So they've got a really good a biologist, helping them break some of these patterns and get some of these. I think he's done a great job, and I've been fortunate enough to interview. I've done a few podcasts, not just maybe like 10, just with people that I thought would be really important, like him. And I got to talk to some of the biologists here in Florida, like the head biologist Jason Dotson.
Cool.
And Summer Lindelin is one of the major players here. She's a great biologist in Florida. So people like that I think can really bring a unique perspective from a professional point of view. I've done some stuff with, and I don't know, you just mentioned MLF, and I know Steven's with them. So shout out to that. They're a good group.
Well, if Steve ever wants to come on the show, maybe we could have, we could all sit back down again and chat about it. But yeah, I believe Steve Barton had written an article for Wired to Fish, and it was on the comprehensive guide of smallmouth. And I was like, this is cool. I think I sent him a couple messages and he responded. I think it didn't go too far, but I was interested, definitely interested. And I didn't realize that he was actually part of the MLF, but seriously, big shout out to Major League Fishing for, having the sense of some fish care. And that's really neat too, that, the biologists, I did not know that they had,
Yeah, he's juiced in up there with those guys, and they, they're working very hard to improve things, and I like to see that. And I think some of the other platforms that do that kind of thing are stuck in their ways. It's more about money than it is about fisheries management, and I think that's sad. But at the
I do
same
agree with
time,
you on that.
when more people, it kind of drives me to do what I do, because again, if you look at that through my eyes, you start losing respect pretty quickly. You got two nice fish up over your head, jaw jacked, getting your picture taken with your $100,000 check or whatever. That's great. I love that. Can we just get them down so we're not breaking their jaw? Can we start there? Can we start there?
I'll be honest with you, and for one of the things that like I've taken to in the past couple of years is that I got really just tired of taking the fish out of the water. And so there's a lot of times when I'm waiting, and yeah, like if I have a small net with me, yeah, he'll go in the net or whatnot.
Yeah.
But that fish,
Just put them back.
I just
Yeah.
put him back, like
That's what I do too. I hook them. And a lot of times you'll see on some of the better fish, if you pay attention on my page, I'll just pick them up. They won't even really be out of the water. They'll be in the net, and I'll just lift the net to get some tension, and they'll kind of be sitting like that in there. But I'll just take a shot of them just laying in the net, and then just let them go. Never even touch them.
And for years, like I've taken photos of fish, like I'm holding them up,
Yeah.
supporting their belly and their jaw, um and then why can't the photo be in the water, like, and it was one of the things that like I just thought like, well, this fish is like, I'm blessed to catch this thing. I'm grateful for it, for taking this lure or whatever. But like, really, at the end of the day, like whether he's here or here, he's so natural in the water and he's majestic and beautiful. And it's like, I just leave him there. And that was like one of the things too, like it was, when I thought about fish handling too, like, well, a lot of people, when you think of nets and, you're touching fish and you see the net that's sitting on the front of a kayak or sitting in the boat all day, and you finally catch a fish, and like that net, it goes into the water, and then fish comes out, whatever, net goes right back up, and it's like, did like there's another fish that's going to go into that net, like would you not think like, oh, maybe I should like rinse it, like, kind of like give it that good little traditional rinse, just get whatever is off, because maybe who knows, you could be spreading something between another, and especially going fishery to fishery. And that was one of the things that I do too, is that like, if I bring my kayak, like I always make sure to, wash it down, and I'll even hose out my net at the end of the day. And I'll be honest, in probably 2 years, I have not left the house with a leaderboard. You know what I mean? Like, it's, to me, it's just pointless. Like, I I just don't see the need to take this fish, and for sure, like if it's big, it's big. But and it is maybe on a scientific side of things. It's important to know the length, but there's a lot of other ways that I can measure a fish without actually having to put it on a leaderboard. And but yet, the idea is that instilled in a lot of this community aspect is, get the what counts is how big was that fish, because nobody wants to believe the number that's written on a post without the actual photo of it being on on an actual catch board or hog trough. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I've got a technique, and I'm going to do a product promotion, even though those guys never, ever even thank me. And I've done a lot of promoting for them. I don't know why, but they just don't. Have you ever seen a McLean weigh net?
No, I haven't.
So it's a net, and they make them for kayaks and for boats. And inside the handle is a spring-loaded scale. So you net the fish, you pop that scale, it pulls down, the weight of the fish pulls down, you get a weight on the fish, and you put it back and you never even touch it. And you got a weight right there in the net, built in the handle. It's brilliant. It's accurate. I've had several of them. I think they're out of Australia.
Oh yeah.
McLean, yeah, MCLEAN Waynet. And if you're really interested in in being as protected in the fish as much as possible, yeah, I recommend that. Now, let's say you don't want to spend a couple $100 on a weigh net. Can't blame you there. You go down to Walmart, get you a $25 net, you don't get the kind with the cord, get like a rubberized one, or, at least a coated nylon one. I prefer to see the rubberizing of some kind over just like fishing lines, like monofilament type nets or anything like that. But you can actually you take those, get the $20, $25 cheap Rapala with the hook.
Yeah.
You see the guy put the hook in the fish's gill. You see this guy? All the time I see this guy.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Put the hook on the net, zero the scale, put the fish in the net, and weigh it in the net. Thank you. Come again. That's all you got to do. Or if you're dumb like me and don't even forget to zero the scale, just weigh the whole thing and subtract the weight of the net. It's usually about 1.5 pounds.
The net that I prefer to use is the Aquatic leverage landing net. It's warm wide. Yeah, it's a great, and the one that I have, it's great because it's all rubberized, and out of all the nets that I've had, I'll be honest with you, it is a very much so fish friendly net. You know what I mean? Like it stores nice, but at the same time, it's just it's made. I just can't see how you can injure the fish in the net, and that it being in the water, and it sits so perfectly in my kayak because it comes down because of the leverage landing, and it comes up that I can hang this thing over the side.
That's the one that comes up like that on the arm, right?
Yeah, it comes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's super nice. Yeah,
yeah, and if it's perfect, and it's very popular. It's a very popular net within. But I also use like just a very traditional style, like fly fishing net too, for when I'm wading and whatnot. And it was just it's one of those things because you look at a lot of these nets and whatnot, and you think that can't be the most, and then you see the net where like the fish is actually getting tangled up in, and you're like, well, like now you're just stressing this thing even more. Like goes back to like a lot of things, and the scale part too, like that is we see it all the time where there it is in the back, and 2 hands on this fish, here we go, it goes up, and you're like, man, you're just ready to rip whatever you got hooked onto that, and that thing's like beginning to flail and flail and flail, and then boom, it pops itself off, and you're like, oh my gosh, like this thing is like, yeah, like I don't know, like I just think like at the end of the day, like it's one of those things, it's a great topic to be had, and fish handling, fish care, it's important because at the end of the day, like this is like what we like to do. And if you don't have the fish, not that we're going to completely diminish it if we go the wrong way with it, but we could definitely have some detrimental effects to these ecosystems. And like you said, this is the one thing that drew me to that post, and I remember when I sent it to you, is just because it swam away, it survived.
Yeah, not necessarily. No.
It was just like, honestly, I was like, oh man, it's one of those things I think about all the time, because when I see fish handling, I think like, okay, that's great, like that's a phenomenal fish, but like, do you honestly think after you just horsed it, you played with it for 5 minutes in the water, you threw it up and then you threw it back in, you really think that thing just swam back and back in my ecosystem? Like, I don't think so. Like I think that thing probably bellied up at some point, you know?
Well, I mean, we went around about all of it, and now with this knowledge and everybody that watches it, they're going to be looking at it through my eyes, the
Yeah.
guy whose job it is to keep the fish alive,
And
and not somebody else's eyes. Oh, it's fine, it swam off. Well, again, let's everything in fisheries and almost everything in our world is statistical, right? We want to give, if we're not making fish tacos, then we want to give the fish the highest probability of survival, do we not? Isn't that the
exactly.
entire idea of catch and release? So when you've done everything possible, from damaging its eyes, removing its slime coat, and damaging its internal organs, jacking its jaw, and then acting like a conservationist when you put it back in the water, I just look at it and roll my eyes and go, Lord, I mean, here's a guy who seems to, let's put it this way. Is it about you or is it about the fish?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I think, there is a sense of, you know, very much so a selfish way to look at it that, in some ways there'll be some greatness that comes from, catching this fish and the way that I present it and whatnot, where really at the end of the day, you're just out there to catch fish. And how you capture that, and there's a lot of ways that you can capture your moments out there. We don't need to go down the electronic side of all cameras and whatnot, but needless to say is that, like, really at the end of the day, it is very true what you're saying, is that, when you do and then you're like, yeah, send them home, but like that doesn't mean it survived. Like that doesn't, yeah. And when I it's something that I've thought about greatly over the years. But when I seen your post about that, and I was just like, oh man, like I think me and this dude need to have a conversation about this. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
really appreciate you having me
oh
on.
man, like
I'll
I
do
was like,
anything.
oh dude, like I was like, and there are very, I will say this, there are a lot of people who probably think the same things that I do. And my buddy Jay Brown, he's another one. We've gone back and forth about a lot of these very similar conversations. But yeah, no, I have to say, like, I am greatly appreciative of you coming on the podcast and sitting down on the river run, as an aqua biologist, and like just really just being able to sit down and get on the same wavelength as you, man. Like I really appreciate it. And I hope if you ever want to come back on and chat again, man, like I
Anytime,
would
man.
I would
Yeah.
love it. Like this is just, I don't know, like you're throwing out knowledge nuggets, as I call them. And I think there are definitely conversations that are worth listening to, and I hope that, for anybody that does take the time to listen to this or to watch it on the YouTube channel, yeah, it is something to think about, next time you're packing up for a trip, or you start to see things, because I think at the end of the day we can all be, stewards of our waterways. We can all take the time, and really at the end of the day there's a younger generation behind us, and that younger generation behind us also, is watching what we're doing.
Mm,
And this is our time to
yeah.
really show them that, maybe some things need to change, and that
Right. And
change
that's
all
why I
starts
do
with
what
us.
I do. Absolutely. Because the social media, the kids are really into it. And then when I saw it, I was just like, 5 generations, 4 generations of anglers all handling fish badly. They're not listening to me. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get them when they're about 10,
Yeah.
and I'm going to get them the information as best as I can. And I've seen it. I had a lady write me a letter. It was really nice. One of the nicest things that's happened. She's a mother of 4, and she's got 2 boys. And of course, the kids got a pond at the house, and they're fishing. And she didn't have to do it, But she wrote me a long note on direct messenger on Instagram about how she loves the page and really appreciates it. Just very kind to me the way you're being to me, and I really appreciate it. And then she kind of touched on, these young men, especially the young men, don't really have any role models that she wants them associating with anymore,
Yeah.
And she's like, they learned about, the way you've blended science with fishing, and now not only are they using that and becoming better fishermen and better stewards for the sport, but she said they've also gotten more interested in science in school. And I'm like, that's really cool,
That is super cool, because if there was one thing that I was always big into, was science. Like, it was in biology was one of my favorites, and I've always been that reptile nerd and
Yeah.
fish nerd, and I became a smallmouth nerd, and it was one of those things. And now I have two kids who are 13 and 10. Well, my son's going to be 13, but I'll be honest with you, when I listen to them talk to me about science and, oh, dad, like, this species, like, it's found out here, and I'm just like, that's so cool. Like, you guys actually like that stuff, like,
Yeah.
and and that's what I mean. Like, and this is why I think this younger generation that's just like, oh, like, yeah, there's video games, but there's still a great amount of people out there who love to go out fishing, who love to get out in the outdoors, whether it's hunting, you know and some of the kids obviously don't always have the opportunity to it, and that's why I always say, and for myself, like, I've always taken the time, to volunteer my time with organizations to take kids fishing, or take veterans fishing, or whatever it needs to be, because at the end of the day, like, this is something that could really change their life in a positive way, but it also could start just this tiny stem of something that will begin to forever grow in their minds of why it's so important to take care of our natural resources, and at the same time take care of the things we love to catch. And if we can do it on a better scale, because it's great to see all the big glitter boats and bass boats and all this and that, and people holding up fish, but really at the end of the day, we're not really setting an example that we're doing ourselves any good. And if we want their children to continue the sport, we need to make the change now.
I agree.
So as we come to an end of this podcast, let them know where they can find you. If they are, I'm sure they know where to find you, but for those who may not know, let them know where to find you, man.
I'm Shan, and I'm aquatic biologist on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I don't do any others. Just been concentrating on those mostly.
All right. Well, all right. I gotta say, thank you so much for stopping on by the River Run podcast. This has been an awesome episode. Don't forget, you can follow the River Run podcast on Instagram, and you can follow it on Spotify, and also the YouTube channel, River Run Podcast TV. The fish biologist, the aqua biologist. This has been a fantastic episode, and I'm so grateful to have you stop on by. Till the next time, we will see you soon. I'm Adam Pross. This is the River Run Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, for future shows, like, follow, share, and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you check out our individual channels and accounts too. Want to be a guest on one of our shows and talk of adventures, gear, or products? Contact us. Thank you for watching The Noob Show with Matt Gibson, Chasing the Tide with Dustin Nichols, The Rusty Hook with John Rapp, The River Run with Adam Fraser Pross, May Contain Fishing with Daniel Woodcock, Chasing the 20s with Carlisle Esterly and Sean Lavery. Friday Night Bites with Brian Schiller. Thanks for tuning into the Paddle and Fin Network. Subscribe and all